No, you're talking about Vectorworks, not SketchUp.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Vector.
Yeah. So
We don't use Vectorworks anymore. We don't. We got
I
rid of
figure,
at
yeah.
so we used to use a software called Vectorworks for CAD, but we switched to AutoCAD because Vectorworks is too painful. I just it's just I don't know. It's like software is software. Okay. So does anybody know any SketchUp or any three-dimensional software at all? No.
Great.
Oh, I know. What's that one called? Autodesk.
Right. So Autodesk has 3D software in it.
No, like I did 3D modeling in Maya.
Maya.
Oh.
Maya is part of Autodesk. Okay, good.
Nice.
What did you think of Maya?
Oh my god.
It's really hard. All right. I want to be really clear with you guys. And you might disagree with me. I don't care. I have a lot of experience with this. You got to know one 3D software at some point along the way. Not a very complex one. I do believe in a couple of years that that Adobe will have a 3D modeler because they're getting pretty close. So
They have one.
Well,
Sort of.
sort of. They have Adobe Dimension,
Yeah.
and that's not really a 3D modeler. It's a sort of 3D. But it's all right. Has anybody used Adobe Dimension, by the way?
Yeah.
If you haven't had a chance, Adobe Dimension is very useful. So what you could do with Adobe Dimension is you could take a 3D model and you can wrap a graphic around it and render it. So for example, if you're doing like a packaging project, because this is what I do, and you want to do a comp without having to build a comp, but you want it to look really pretty. They have already 3D objects in there, or boxes and other things, and you could probably find examples, download. You take your graphic element and you could wrap that element and render, and it looks really, really good. So I'd say if you want to experiment a little, the other good thing about, and I'll give you a good thing about today. So the great thing about SketchUp is you can import SketchUp files into Adobe Dimension. So
Yeah,
if
you can do that with Maya too.
yes, you can do it with any. Literally, it'll take like Rhino, Maya, because it uses the OBJ files. Yes.
What about like Blender?
So Blender is a really good thing to think about. So Blender is free, but I'd say that's the only thing I would recommend about it in terms of. So Blender is extremely hard to learn. I use Blender myself. Blender does, but there are certain aspects of Blender that are actually pretty good that you could use without using full Blender. So for example, Blender renders really well. So Blender will create some beautiful 3D visualizations. What I tend to do is I create my model in another software, usually SketchUp or Rhino, and then I bring it into Blender and then animate it or do other things. That's a big thing we do a lot in our industry. We mix and match softwares. Fundamentally, it depends on the industry you go into, what 3D software you want to use. So if you're a graphic designer, when I work with branding agencies, we tend to use a combination, sometimes Maya, depending on if they're using AutoCAD. Sometimes we use Rhino, or SketchUp still used a lot, to be honest with you, kind of amazing. That's shocking how much it gets used. Those are the softwares. If you're going into like something more like animation, 3D modeling for figures and forms, then you're going to see much more use of like Maya, or 3D Studio Max is still used a lot, which is kind of like an older type of Maya product, or Cinema 4D is used a lot. So it depends on what your skill base is, but I will be blunt. They're going to expect in the future, almost any area you go into in any of these fields, to know some 3D modeling of some areas. And as I said, one day, I think Adobe will have a really good 3D modeler, and then it'll all be integrated, which is kind of what I'm hoping for, but it'll probably be another 3, 4, 5 years. And then in all probability, they'll probably just buy one of the existing 3D modeling tools. And the other thing is, to keep in mind, most of the 3D modeling tools are very similar. So if you use Maya and you use like Fusion 360, or you use Twinmotion, they're all very similar in their interfaces. So once you know one, it's kind of easier to know the other. Like I know a few of them, so like I can get on Blender and do some stuff, but it's like you, the other problem is it's just you have to use it every day, or else it just goes out one ear and out the other. But all right, let's get into SketchUp. All right, SketchUp is what's called a surface modeler. Okay, it's not. There are two different types of modeling tools. One is called an object modeler, and one is called a surface modeler. An object modeler is where every object you create has like a form to it, and it has an basically it's like a vector model, three-dimensional. It's got value to it. A surface modeler, which is what SketchUp is basically where everything may look like solid forms, but it's not. It's actually made up of lines and surfaces that form a lot of different shapes and forms. So there's no such thing as a curve in a surface modeler. Even things that look like curves are actually a series of little lines and faces. So it's something you have to keep in mind because it totally impacts the way you use the two different types of tools overall. Like when you use Blender, essentially you're kind of like a sculptor, and you have a block and you're sculpting that block. And in SketchUp, it's the opposite. You're basically forming a series of faces and lines. It's basically like what Tron was. Well, yeah, you guys would know Tron, but like basically the way we used to do it in the old days. Okay, so when you open up SketchUp, you would open up a model like this. Okay, and the first thing I always do is remove this person. Okay. Okay. Now, SketchUp is basically it's basically a one-to-one tool. That means 1 inch equals 1 inch, 1 foot equals 1 foot, and the environment you're in is endless. It goes for thousands of miles. So scale, it's perfect scale, and it's not an issue that you particularly have to worry about to a certain extent. So there you go. So the limitless tool. So usually the first thing that I do is I define my workspace. Okay. SketchUp has a series of trays like you would have in Illustrator. Okay, that go over different commands. And one of the first trays to really understand is one called styles. Okay. And if you open up styles, you can establish your workspace. Okay, whether it is white or whether it uses color, or whether it uses hidden line. And so you're establishing your overall workspace, and you're establishing where you are in space. Everything in SketchUp is either parallel or perspective. So if you're, right now it's in perspective mode, but if you go to camera parallel mode, it will be everything will be at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so it won't have perspective to it if you do it that way, on top of everything else. Okay, so when we're in this overarching space, okay, we can create two things, lines and surfaces. Okay? If I create a line, oops. So if I create a line on the floor like this, okay, I can't do anything with it. It's just a dumb line. Okay, that's it. But if I take two more lines and I put them together, the area in between is a surface. And I can manipulate that surface. Okay? And so for example, I can go to this one, which is called push pull, this button right here, and I could lift it up, okay, and create a form. So this is not an object, okay? This is a series of lines and faces. And so if I oops. If I press that and delete it, right, I can now see inside this hollow surface for a face. Okay? So every face is manipulable by pushing and pulling. The other thing about SketchUp is every time you take a line and you break a surface, you create multiple surfaces. Okay? So now I created 2 surfaces. And then if I do it the other way, I created 4 surfaces. All right? And so when I press push pull, I can push it in different directions overall. Does that make sense? And how that works? Okay. The other big thing to think about is this. Okay? Everything has a measurement. Okay? If you're just drawing shapes, I don't know how big that shape is. So what you want to do is you want to be able to measure things as you go along. To do that, there's a dialog box in the bottom right called measurement. Okay? And when you create something, you could see the measurement, the length coming on the bottom box. Okay? You can make this an exact measurement, okay, by doing this. For example, if you take this line and you move it in this direction and you type 10 feet, that's 10 and apostrophe, which you see in the bottom right line, okay, and feet is apostrophe.
Yeah, sorry.
So, here, let's just, so, if I type a line and it says 10 feet, 10 inches, and you can see 10 feet is apostrophe, inches is quotation. And you press return, there it is. Obviously, this is a really big area overall. So if I go to extents, this box, it'll zoom in on where your overall line is. So that line is 10 feet, 10 inches. Yes?
How do you change the plane that your line is on?
What do you mean by change the plane?
Like if it's on the X plane,
Right.
what if you want to change it to a Y plane?
So that's a good question. All right. So for example, if you're going to the Y plane, right? If I go this line, you see it's red. Red means X plane. Blue means Y plane. That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing that you want to do is when you create a square, for example, you could go here you could type 4 apostrophe comma 4 apostrophe, and there's a 4 foot by 4 foot square. Okay? And that allows you to measure out exactly the scale and the size and the elements that you want to do. You could even do something like you could use this tool, which is a tape measure. And if you pull it out and put 2 feet, it'll create a little pinpoint right there, which is not a line. It doesn't get seen when you do a drawing, but allows you to establish measurement points in your area. So if I draw a line, I know I could start it right there and go right there. Okay. So in that respect, you could even do it vertically. So you could go 4 feet and it will go up vertically 4 feet. Okay. You could even push things in. So for example, you don't just have to push things out. You could push things in. You can even create a window. in your space. And by doing that, you create all kinds of shapes and forms as part of the pieces. When you created a shape to the level that you would like to, you would then go to edit, make group, and then everything is combined into one form. Okay, this is really comes in handy because once you start making more complex shapes, every time you touch something, it will move, and things go bad really fast unless you're grouping things. The other big thing that you want to do is you want to also be able to put things on layers. So the way you would do that is you would go to Window, Tags. Now tags are the same as layers. They probably lost some type of copyright infringement thing, so they had to rename it tags. And it works just like Illustrator. If you go plus, and you just create a tag, right there, like this. And so if I go to Window, Entity Information, I could put it on a different layer, like this. And now this is on this layer overall. Yes?
How do you do group again?
Oh, sure. So if you if you kind of highlight everything together, so you just do it by putting a box around it. So if you put a box around it like this, it'll put everything in the box around it. If you go the other way, it will everything it touches will be in the box. So let's just say if we touch everything here and we go edit, make group. You see that? See right that? Right, and edit, make group, and then everything is one box. And then if you want to explode this, you would go edit, explode, and it will go back to where it was. So in the group area of edit, you could group and you could explode. Now the other big thing is, even though this may be grouped, you could still edit it by double clicking. And you could edit inside the group. It's really important that you group things a lot and put things together. Because if you don't, and you try to start manipulating things, things start moving in different directions without your intention. So it's really important you group things. Yes?
If our project's circular,
All right, the beautiful circle. SketchUp. All right, one thing I will tell you about SketchUp. If everything in your life is rectangular, SketchUp is the greatest tool that ever lived. Better than any other 3D modeler. The easiest, it's the most useful. But if you're creating curves, it's the worst tool that ever lived. Okay, but you can do curves in SketchUp. Okay, and actually in SketchUp, you can do everything that you could in another modeling tool, but you just can't do it with the basic software. Okay, I won't get into plugins with you except to say that if you want to do any complex curves, you have to get a plugin. I could show you where they are, but that's for you to figure out. That goes beyond the constraints of this class. But if I'm going to do a curve, so for example, if I pick a circle, okay, you see that circle? What do you see about that circle?
Straight edges.
Right. Now, if I want to make it look more like a real circle, here's what I do. This is something that some people who use SketchUp for years never know. And you're knowing now in the first 15 minutes of this lecture.
Nice.
Yeah, so you're going to learn a tool here. So if you go to Windows, Entity Info, it's actually in here now. Okay. What you're going to do is you're going to see something on here. Okay, and it's going to say segments. You see segments? Okay, that's the number of segments in that circle. If I type 48, look what happens. It makes the circle even more circular as part of what we're doing. Right here, let me see. Okay, So the more segments you add, the reason why it's acting this rough is because of the screen. It's not on your laptop. It'll be very even. Okay, but by adding more segments, you make it look more like a curve, and it will look like a realistic curve overall in terms of everything. Okay, so you can make curved surfaces in that form. Okay, if you want to if you want to create more like shapes of a certain form, you would have to do. Oh God.
Is this free?
Yes,
For 30 days.
for 30 days. Remember what I said? 30 days.
30 days? Okay.
30 days.
How much does it cost after 30 days?
$55.
$55 for what?
What's that?
Year?
For what? Like
Per
per year?
year. Per year.
Oh, okay.
$55 per. I would not suggest you buy it unless you're really using it. As I mentioned before, when you work in groups, buy one license and share it for 30 days, and then after 30 days, get another license. It's by email. So if you have 5 emails, you can go for 5 months. Does that make sense?
Just keep
But-
making new emails.
Right, exactly. But if in SketchUp, it means you'd have to sign in to use the warehouse in here because the school didn't put in the license for the warehouse.
Oh yeah, I had to use my phone Wi-Fi to get it.
Right, and stuff like that. So the other thing that you could do is you could add materials to your model. Okay? Yes.
How do you add colors to it?
I'm just getting that now. Okay. So we go to Windows and we go to the window box materials. Okay? If I put a paint bucket right here, okay, and I pick a material, let's say I pick, I don't know, brick. I make everything into brick. Now, I can adjust my materials, okay, by going into edit, and I can adjust the height and width of the material. So right now the width is 3 feet and the height's 110. If I go 2 feet, there it goes. So what it does is it will change the size of that brick by changing the size in there. I could also change the opacity of the brick by using the opacity button, okay? I could also bring in pictures myself and make that into a material. So if I go to new texture, okay, and let's say I open up something, I don't know, see if there's anything on here. Nothing's on here. All right, well, if there was a picture on here, I can import a picture into this model, and that picture will go into, you could paint the picture on as a material, just like you would a brick or anything else. Does that make sense?
Like in Dimension.
Exactly. So if I go, so if, as I said, all I have to do is go to a drop down and go new texture, and then it will allow me to import a picture in as a texture.
Like if we have NTF with texture images and
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you have texture images in, you would import it in through here. okay, by going into new texture. And then where that texture will be, uh, will be, okay, wait a second.
How do you move around on the plane?
What's that?
How do you move around on the plane?
By using the hand tool. And guys,
Like if you need to rotate.
then you use the rotate tool, this tool right here.
Oh, okay.
Now, guys, if you get stuck and you get lost, this is what I always do. If I don't know where everything is, I press the zoom extents. That's the zoom with the little arrows around it. And then if I use camera, okay, so right now this is perspective view, right? But if I want to make it into an isometric, I could go parallel view. Do you see the difference? It makes it into a pure 2D form. If I want to do an ISO view, I would go standard views. This is really helpful. Standard views, ISO, and it makes it into a perfect isometric drawing. If I want to do camera view, top view, look what it does. It will make it a standardized top view. Okay? Now if I do this as a perspective, you see what it did? It's a top view, but now I'm looking at it like a perspective. So I'm seeing these lines go down. Does that make sense? How that work? This is the biggest mistake a lot of students make, is they confuse perspective view and parallel view. It even happens well into the 5th semester, until I yell at them about 8,000 times. And then sometimes they'll change it. I won't tell you how many times I've brought that up. It's pretty common. Okay, parallel projection. All right, does everybody understand how that works?
Yeah.
So using standard views really helps a lot in terms of developing these views all together. Almost always when I'm teaching another section of 216, as you know. So I ask my students to do this. I'm asking them to do 3 things. I'm asking them to do an elevation view, which is like where what I'll do is I'll ask them to do a view in one elevation format, then export this into Illustrator, and then render it in Illustrator, right? So what you could then do is you can export as a 2D graphic, and it will give you different things like DWG files for AutoCAD files, or JPEGs for obviously JPEGs, or EPS files. Does everybody know what an EPS file is, by the way? Didn't they guys teach you anything in vector graphics? Okay. All right. An EPS file is a vector line file, right? A JPEG is a raster file, right? You guys know what a JPEG is, right? So a JPEG is rasterized imagery, okay? It's a photograph, essentially. An EPS file is a file where it becomes vectorized. So the lines have a value to it, so you can put it in Illustrator. So if you wanted to import this into Illustrator, you can import it in as an EPS file. So usually I ask my students to do 3 things. One of them, I ask them to do an elevation. And obviously I don't want them to do the elevation in SketchUp. I want them to do the elevation in Illustrator. So I will ask them to import that illustration, that view, into Illustrator. Does that make sense? The second thing I ask them to do usually is I ask them to do an isometric drawing of their space, like an exploded diagram, right? Or something of that nature. In that case, I will usually ask them to do a parallel view, ISO view, okay? And then I'll have them import it in as an ISO view using materials, using all those other elements. Or if they want to, they could always bring that into Illustrator and dress it up in Illustrator. if you export it, in that case, you would export it as a JPEG file, a JPEG image. Okay. So here's the other thing to think about when you're exporting, just to keep in mind. Make sure that you export it as a high resolution, right? So it usually exports as 1276 pixels, which tends to be not quite enough to make it a good image. But you can raise it to like 3000, and that should be good enough for your JPEG image. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward. Same thing overall. Yeah, because I hate seeing rastery looking files, right? I like to see my files crisp. That's part of the overall work. Then the third thing I do is I tend to like this to do a perspective. Okay? And when I do a perspective, this is the way I usually do it. I will. So, by the way, when you pick this house and you do colors and models, it'll provide you a list of all the colors and materials you have in your model. So if you add a picture or anything of that nature, it will be in here, and you can always use it when you get a chance to use it as part of your project work. Okay, everybody understand what I'm getting at? Okay, so usually what I'll do for a perspective is this. I'll do a perspective view, okay? And if I do a perspective from a human's point of view, I'll go camera, position camera, and it will allow me to position the camera as a human being. Let me try this again. Usually it gives me a little person. I don't know where the little guy is. Okay, so what I could do is position myself like a person on the site, and then you could go to camera, walk, and you can walk around like you're a human being on the site. Okay? Or you could just look around while you're standing in place. If you like your view, all right, you could lock your view in. And you would do that by going to something called scenes. All right, so suppose I like that view. I press plus and go create scene. All right, now that scene is locked in. So if I go way out here and I type plus again, it'll type another plus in from way out there, another scene. So what happens there is if I go back to this one again, it'll go right to my scene that I was in before. If you like to do animation, you could do animation in SketchUp by going to animation, play. So if you want to walk around your site, you could do multiple scenes. So for example, if you want to create multiple scenes of your site, you could do a walk around your site. Does that make sense? And then you could export it as an animation. So you could export it as an MP4 file. Okay? If I do animations, this is the way I do it. I'm actually going to require my students this semester to do animations because I always like to have them do animations. But don't do like, oh, here's this long walk around. It doesn't work that way. The best thing to do is do multiple short animations and go into Adobe Premiere. Does everybody know Adobe Premiere? You know what I'm talking about? And just link them together in Adobe Premiere and tell a story with your animations. And then you could add text and you could add fun stuff. You could add sound, you know, and that type of thing. Should I show them what you could do if you're really into this?
Yeah.
All right. Because actually I'm doing you get to your lucky day. I'm doing a lecture on this very subject today.
Yes.
So you're lucky. Okay, so
This is $1 million lecture.
this is a lucky lecture.
I find it from YouTube.
No, I
I'm
was
serious.
no.
I'm looking for it.
I was working on this last night actually for this thing. So it's your lucky day. All right, so
Do you have a phone?
yeah. It's not that I have a phone, it's do I get reception? Come on, come on. There's no reception down here.
Oh, no. Do you have a Wi-Fi?
Let's see. Got it. Yes, it's me. All right, that it worked. What's that?
Is there a way to center things?
Yes. Yes. Here, wait a
I
second.
mean, like one object on top of another object, centering it to the object.
Yeah, I could show you how to do that. Yeah. So if you wanted to create a video, so if you wanted to create a cool video, like this is one that my 260. This is one my students created last year. These were students who, this is not what I required. They wanted to do this. So this is all SketchUp.
Wow.
So this is all done with SketchUp. Now how you know it's done in SketchUp? Because when you look at the curves closely, there's a few little lines. How? Well, let me show you how that works. All right. So, SketchUp has one really, really great thing about it, and this is the reason why SketchUp is used. This is the reason why SketchUp is used a lot in terms of the work that we're doing and everything. The reason why SketchUp is used so often is because it has so many plugins. So, for example, SketchUp has a 3D warehouse, which I would normally show you, except I don't have access to it
Oh, is
because.
that what the interior design uses for, you can
Yes, that's what. Yeah, we use it in our classes too. So with a warehouse, you can download millions of models. So if I want to get a model of the Eiffel Tower, and I just type in Eiffel Tower in the warehouse, you could download the Eiffel Tower. So we use it a lot in spatial experience for palm trees and anything you want to do, any type of display element. It really comes in handy, like draperies. The other big thing SketchUp does well is it has what's called an extensions library, and the extensions library has little what we call plugins or extensions that allow you to do things like complex curves and special shapes. And it could allow you to bring in all sorts of different materials. Without plugins, frankly, SketchUp is very limited.
Yes.
With plugins, SketchUp is every bit as powerful as any other 3D modeling tools. So I would say, in my opinion, this class is kind of like training wheels SketchUp, like basic, just learn the basics for the most part. Okay, if you want to get more advanced, there's a course called the SketchUp Essentials that's on YouTube. SketchUp Essentials is literally how everybody who knows SketchUp learns how to use it well. SketchUp Essentials, and you could also learn Rhino that way. But one of the big things that you could do with SketchUp or any other 3D modeling software, but SketchUp does it particularly well for whatever reason, because I've tried them all, is it goes really easy into rendering software. So the software that you see here is a free piece of software called Twinmotion. Okay, Twinmotion is made by a company called Unreal Engines. Does everybody ever heard of Unreal Engine before? Okay, Unreal Engine is the company that makes the underlying software behind video game making. Okay, so Unreal makes their own 3D modeling software for use in animation, which we don't tend to use because it's even harder to learn than Blender, frankly. But it created something called Twinmotion, and Twinmotion allows you to import SketchUp files into Twinmotion, like you saw here, and turn it into a rendered drawing that you could add foliage and change materials, and you could add those people that do this. They actually can walk too, but usually if you like, they can either walk in place. You can add cars. I actually did when Twinmotion first came out about 6 years ago, I'm guessing. I was working for a company called the Barnice Group I was doing work for a company called Barnice Group, and we did a full video with cars and movement, and everybody was like, how? It's not humanly possible to do all this. And now everybody does it. Now it's like if anybody can do it. So just to go into it a little bit is, I created a little bit of a slideshow for this that I'll just go over quickly, and I'm just going to go through this pretty fast. So I'm doing this lecture for my 5th semester students. Let me skip over that. Yeah, Skyer level a little bit.
Yes.
So I'm going to go through this quickly. So if you're really, really interested. All right, sorry, I'm just going to skip down. Sorry, we're also going through other software too.
I have a quick question. The Cat Cafe animation.
That's Twinmotion. Yeah, yeah, guys, remember the Cat Cafe from last week? That was done in Twinmotion. There are actually 2 major softwares that you could do animation in for SketchUp. One is Twinmotion. The other is called Enscape, if anybody's ever heard of Enscape. So Enscape is designed for architects. It's really used more for walkthroughs. The difference between Enscape and Twinmotion is Twinmotion is built for the video game market, so it's got like lots of figures, but everything kind of doesn't look quite real. It's like if you squint, it's real, but if you really look closely, it's not real. Enscape is what's called perfect photorealism. Like it looks like real. It's like 100% real, but it's very dry looking, in my opinion. It's not very expressive. So interior design uses Enscape, and spatial experience design tends to use Twinmotion. But we don't really care. If you want to use I'm kind of a software agnostic. Whatever works best for what you're trying to do. And a lot of our students come out of interior design or industrial design too, so they tend to use Enscape, and it's just a preference. Okay, so you could do Twinmotion. Here's V-Ray. V-Ray is the other really popular rendering tool. Okay, like V-Ray could do stuff like this. Yeah. All right, so here's Twinmotion. Okay, so Twinmotion allows you to import a file in, and it will import it in as a full file. Now the big thing you have to do when you import a file in, and if you really want to do this, I wouldn't make this a requirement, of course, but if you're really interested, you import it in, making sure that all the materials that you want to use are separated out. The reason for that is Twinmotion has their own, Twinmotion has their own material library, like you see here. And you could drag these materials in. But if you're using the same materials, it'll change everything that's the same material to the new material. Okay. You could also bring in your own, just like SketchUp, it works exactly the same. You could create your own texture by saying new texture. So here's an example of that. So I just created my own new texture here by adding a texture, a picture, and then bringing it in to Twinmotion as a material texture as part of what you're trying to do. You could add vegetation and trees, and you could add people, like you see the people. You could add, and then you could make the people dance and do weird things, and you could add cats and dogs, and you get the picture. Okay. You can then, just like SketchUp, you could create scenes called creating images, where you could create fixed images by going where you want it to go. And just like SketchUp works exactly the same way, you can also create video by going to video and just adding scenes and creating a walkthrough with scenes in video. And then exporting it. Like I did this last night really fast. I screwed around with it. Maybe I did this in about like 15 minutes, made a rendering. See, I screwed up where it is. You see it's like slightly floating above the plane. I kind of messed that up, but all right. But overall, and so I then made this video really fast and I exported it. And then the video is, so this video took me only about 15 minutes. I put it in Adobe Premiere. And I added music, added scenes, so this took about 15 minutes for me to make out of a SketchUp. So this is from a SketchUp model. Made my ruins. So that was basically a collection of 2 videos fading between them. Okay, so why is SketchUp so great? Because it's easy. Okay, that's the reason. And it's a good gateway to other modeling tools. The other big modeling tool I use is one called Rhino. Rhino is really, really popular in the overall 3D market, but it costs about $200. So they're all, Maya is free because if you're a student, because it's an AutoCAD product. So I think it depends on what you're interested in. And what your focus is on each tool. But I would strongly suggest that you guys master or think about mastering at least one 3D software tool. It will come in handy in many, 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 many ways that you don't even know yet. So when I do my work, I use a collection of software all the time. So this is the way I do it. Okay, elevations I do in Illustrator. And plans, illustrated plans, I do in Illustrator. Okay, or CAD, but Illustrator for the graphic plans. For anything that involves a rendering, I will render it in a 3D software and import it into Photoshop and do post-production. Change the lighting, change the sound. Most often, I'm not really into photorealistic rendering. I like to do what I call hybrid rendering. So often, I will just take a SketchUp model or a Rhino model, just bring the lines in, draw over it by hand or on Procreate. Do you guys know Procreate? So that's usually what we do. And then I render it in Procreate or in Photoshop. Okay. If I am doing an animation, I will use, as I said, Twinmotion or Enscape and Adobe Premiere. Okay, and break it up using Adobe Premiere in that form. So I have a work that we call it workflow. And what you want to do as a designer and as a student, and the reason why in this class we tend to like to mix and match a lot of software is because you guys have to start thinking and learning about workflow, right? Like, so for example, like what is best to do in Illustrator, what is best to do in InDesign, right? So if I'm doing a project involving boards or a process book, I'll do it in InDesign. But if I'm doing like a big presentation board, I'll probably do it in Illustrator. So it's kind of like, how do you use software as part of a flow and as part of the work you do? And then how do you know how that software connects? That's the key. Like in a program like ours, you're always mixing and matching. In fact, my biggest struggle in a school is just getting all the software we need onto the right computers. You know, it's like every day there's like this, no, this computer doesn't have this software, this computer doesn't have this software. But from your own point of view, you want to think, what kind of work am I doing? How do I create a workflow to manage that kind of work? And how do I do it? The other thing you want to think about is this. Your computers might not be powerful enough to run some software. So for example, in Twinmotion, you can download it and you could probably manipulate, but if you're going to render, your computer might not be powerful enough to render. In that case, find a more powerful computer at the school just to do the so our computer lab has more powerful computers than you have. Just go into a computer lab at the school and render on the computer lab computers as part of what you're doing, okay? Because most of you are using, do most of you have Macs? Macs are toys. They're junk when it comes to advanced visualization, okay? A Mac is a fun thing to use for doing basic work, okay? I'm not saying this to burst your bubble. Almost all laptops are not powerful enough. It's not just Macs. So, but I want to be clear about this. Know where there are computers in the labs here that have the more, which are plenty of computers that have it, that have more advanced rendering software that you want to use. And just, you could always manipulate it on your own laptop, but then when you need to do rendering or video, go to a more advanced laptop, because what will happen is you'll pick render, and then your computer screen will just freeze, and that'll be it. It'll be done. Okay? Does this make sense, everybody?
Yeah. Yeah, Professor, I'm wondering how to import our floor plan of our the exhibition or interface
Into SketchUp?
to the SketchUp and the build.
Okay, that's a good question. So to import into SketchUp is pretty straightforward. So you don't want to import it in as a you don't want to import it in as a texture. You want to import it as a picture. And so when you bring it in, you go File, Import, and then it'll take all of these imported views. So JPEG, I would tend to import it as a JPEG. And then it literally will come in as just like another surface. And it'll come in, I don't have an example, or else I show you. Here, actually, maybe I could just download an example right now, which should be easier to do this way. Okay.
Yes, the window is there, but I didn't feel like cutting it because it felt like it was gonna fall apart if I did that. The reason I made it so skinny at first is because if you look at the dimensions of the existing structures, they are very small. So I didn't want to make them get
All right, there you go.
wider than the existing structure, but like I did it, I realized
See it come in?
yeah.
So if you put it in, as an image like this, guys. All right. So if you put it in, it'll come in as an image, and you could scale it. And then it comes in as just another flat element on space that you could put on the ground. Now, if you guys want to use it without it moving, you could always go to edit, and you could lock it. Oops.
So that's why I tried to click down this and try this. I also, how do I cut out a shape?
Okay, let me show you that. Okay. So you mean, but
Like if I want to make a doorway.
right? Okay, let's make a doorway. All right. So first, let me make you a box. Let's say that make it from. All right. So let's say I want to make this into walls. Okay. I would use this command here called the offset, and if I click the line, I just created walls. Okay, and you can measure the size of the walls by using measurement. So if you click the line, this line here, you see that? How that comes in?
Yeah.
Okay, I've just created walls. So if I remove this, right, I've created walls on an interior. If I lift it up, I've created a box with an interior. And if I want to create a door, make a box, right? And now this is its own shape. You see that? And then if I go push pull, I created a door. You see how I did that?
Yeah.
So basically what you want to do, if you want to create like a shape that you could go into or a room, you could create a series of rooms. So let's say, I don't know, I'm just bringing it up. When you remove these lines, it turns everything into one shape. You see that? So that's one shape. So if I go to offset, I could create walls on a complex structure. Okay. Then I push that up, made my shape, make my door, push my door in. Okay. Now, if I want to walk around that interior, all right, what I'll probably do is this. All right, so here I will do camera, position camera. All right, I just went through my front door right there. Let me make a scene. Now let me walk around. Here's where it gets a little janky. Here. Yeah, you got to be careful. Let me move it in. All right.
Create another scene. Create another scene. Create another scene. So now I just created a walkthrough of the inside of that space. So if I go to animation, this looks terrible on the screen. I don't know why. I don't know why it's doing this. All right, but you get what I'm saying. I don't know why that is exactly, but yes.
I'm so sorry, but I have a curved surface, and you can't push. It says cannot push pull curved surfaces.
Well, what are you trying to push and pull?
This is my model. It's really bad, but so this is supposed to be a circle, right?
Right.
And this is supposed to be. A
Okay, so here's what you got to do. All right, suppose that's a curved surface, right? I mean, you want to do a, so you want to take a curved surface. So realizing that it's not really a curve, but it's a series of segments. Okay, what you want to do then is you want to start by do an offset like that. Okay. And carving out the area in the space. So now
Okay.
you just do it in a couple segments. Does that make sense?
Okay.
See how I just did that?
Yeah. Thank you. Wait, how did you just use the line for that?
Mm-hmm. You just take a line, because remember, whenever you do a line, you split out the line.
Right.
Okay, for everything of that nature. Does that make sense? So it's used in that particular area, and in that way, you're able to create an open shape, and then you would just do another collection of shapes to get to the rest of the form, as part of doing what you're doing. So that's the way you would do that. Okay.
Professor, many of students came a little late, so they didn't hear about the downloading SketchUp program. So could you tell us what's the name?
Sure. So downloading the software, again, as I mentioned before, is it's free for 30 days to download the full version. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to go on and use your email address. So if you're working in a group, pick one person in the group first and share that email address and password for the first 30 days. Then after 30 days, switch to another group. And that's how you can keep working for 30 days.
What happens if you're working alone?
Well,
Like-
then use do you have two different email accounts?
I suppose I could just make another email.
Yeah, let's make another email and use the other email. What's that?
Yeah. I said like I have like 6 from just doing.
Yeah, I'm sure if you could dig up, so if you do like 2 email accounts, you can do it for 60 days. We have interior design students who've done it like 9 email accounts, 10 email. And in my opinion, if you're using it that continuously, pay the goddamn $55. I mean, at that point, no, it's per year.
But yeah, that makes
In fact, I think my subscription just ran out like the other day.
Yeah, I
You know,
feel
but-
like maybe if you could like own the software, students would be more enticed to actually pay the $55. But since it's like a yearly thing, it's like like why would I do that when I could just like.
Well,
use
as I
it,
said, if you want to
I
use,
pay for my own Adobe account. Like I don't use the school Adobe account because I have a website.
Okay.
And-
Like I think we still pay for it in the technology.
well, if you want to use it for, so here, this is, I can't endorse this, but if you want to have SketchUp permanently for free, you could use, there's SketchUp Make 2017 is the last year that you were able to, and you could download that for free and use it permanently for free. I still have it on my computer and stuff like that, and that you could download for free. Now, it does have some limitations, but for the most part, it's not. But as I said, it depends on how much you use SketchUp. I mean, if you're using it like every day, you know, $55 is really a very small price to pay. You know, I mean,
I mean, you guys, you're in school. You have no idea how much people pay for software. I mean, it is like when you graduate and you work for a company. Like I have my own company, and on average, I probably spend, I don't know, $1,500 a year on subscriptions for software. It's a cost of doing business. That's the cost of us doing business. SketchUp's the cheapest, far and away the cheapest. Rhino is considered the second cheapest. If you're an academic, it's I could probably get it for like $100. But actually that's what's good about Rhino, that is permanent. That's not yearly. And then for Rhino, if you're a professional, it's $500, which I know sounds like a lot, but to most people that's actually considered pretty cheap, especially if it's a permanent one. Cinema 4D is $499 a year. So any serious software is going to be expensive. How much is Adobe Creative Suite professionally if you're buying it?
I think just for my monthly subscription, it's like 50.
But you're buying it as a student still, even though you're buying it.
Yeah.
You're not buying it through our account, but you're still saying you're a student when you.
Oh no, I'm not a student anymore because I used it for 4 years continuously.
Oh, right,
And I
then you're
can't
not a
buy it
student
as a
anymore.
student.
Right. So actually Adobe Creative Suite is a subscription model, so you pay monthly. In fact, I have to still, even though we have a free account at FIT, I still have to pay, I think, $25 a month for using. I got like Adobe Stock, which allows you to use like music, and so that costs like $25 a month. Yeah.
Wait, this is just like a curious question, but if you're like freelancing, could you write this off on your taxes as a business?
All right. This is a good question. now I really like that question a lot. Okay. And know why? Because I have my own business outside. And I'm sure Kira's had her own business and stuff. You write everything on LifeOff.
Okay.
Like everything. I write my wife's dry cleaning. Hey, she uses it for work.
Yeah.
But realize this: you need to have an accountant. So when you have your own business, you have to have an accountant. You can't do it your own taxes at that point because the IRS literally has headhunters looking for private businesses to hurt them. And also, if you invest any money, you better have an accountant. That's the other thing. But here's things you can write off, just to be clear. Your transportation can be written off. So any time you go anywhere, your subway is written off, your New Jersey Transit's written off. Anytime you go from A to B, I write off everything I do for work. You know why? I do 5 minutes of consulting work every day. Just enough so I could say I'm doing consulting work, okay? All software can be written off completely and everything like that. So anything that's directly related to a business expense. You can write meals off if it's directly related, but you gotta be careful about that. That's where the IRS will get you. Things like meals. They used to make it easier, but they've been getting a little bit, but they're still pretty easy. As I said, it is. Here's a few other things you can write off. So do all you work from do you work at home at points, right? Do you have a computer in your